Laszlo, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today in Brussels. As Laszlo said, I'm James Joiner, and I work as the lead analyst at GSMAi Intelligence, the research and consulting arm of the GSMA. Together with my colleagues in the GSMAi Intelligence team, I've had the pleasure of co-authoring the Mobile Economy Europe 2025 report, from which I'm going to share key insights with you today. But before I do that, I just want to give a brief bit of background on GSMAi Intelligence in case anybody isn't familiar with our work. So we're a team of around 40 industry analysts and economists based across London, Barcelona, Buenos Aires, and New Delhi. We provide data, forecasts, and reports on the mobile industry, covering everything from 5G and fiber broadband to the latest consumer and enterprise trends. Our flagship reports, such as the Mobile Economy Europe, highlight and leverage this research to demonstrate how mobile technology is shaping societies and economies around the world. The Mobile Economy Europe 2025 report is the first in our Mobile Economy 2025 research series. We then have a series of other region-specific reports coming out later this year, tied to different GSMA events. So my presentation today will take the form of 4 sections, each covering key themes from the Mobile Economy Europe report. First of all, I'll take a look at the broader economic and social impact of the mobile industry, drawing on some key data sets in the report. I'll then provide an overview of the European mobile market and where we think it's headed with regards to key indicators like mobile revenues and mobile capex. That will lead us on to the third section of the report, which will focus on 5G and compare Europe's 5G rollout to that of other advanced regions. And then finally, I'll look at some key trends and future revenue opportunities with one eye on MWC Barcelona. So let's kick things off by looking at the economic and social impact of the mobile industry, which provides some important context for the latter parts of the presentation. So first up, we have the total economic contribution of the mobile industry, which has been put together by a team of economists at GSMA. In 2023, mobile technologies and services generated around 5% of GDP across Europe, which is equivalent to almost 1.1 trillion in economic value added. You can see there on the slide that the biggest contribution comes from the productivity effects of mobile. You then have the indirect effects of mobile, so that's things like job creation and other spin-off industries, which generate an additional 130 million euros. And then lastly, we have what we describe as the direct contribution of the mobile ecosystem. And that consists of 3 parts: mobile operators, infrastructure and equipment, and content and services. And together, those 3 elements generate 230 billion euros. So all in all, it's a significant contribution to the mobile economy to Europe's economy. The importance of the mobile industry to the health of Europe's economy can be seen in plenty of other indicators we include within the report. For example, Europe's mobile economy makes a significant contribution to the funding of Europe's public sector, with 120 billion raised through taxes in 2023. The largest contribution came from employment taxes and social security payments, which generated around 50 million euros. And that's followed by services VAT, sales tax, and excise duties at 40 billion. In addition to its significant fiscal contribution, the mobile industry also creates a lot of jobs. So the mobile operators and the wider mobile ecosystem provided direct employment to 2 million people in 2023. We then have an additional 1 million jobs created through the economic activity of the industry, and those jobs are in other industries. Of course, the mobile industry doesn't just make a sizable economic impact. We've already heard about the importance of mobile technologies to delivering improved social inclusion. We can see this when we look at how mobile usage has evolved over the last few years. And it now extends beyond just the obvious activities like reading news, searching for information, and encompasses a much broader range of tasks. So thanks to improvements in network quality and network services, we can see that more than half of Europe's mobile subscribers now engage in activities like accessing government and health services, managing and paying bills, and supporting their education and training needs. Now, these activities, they're not just practical, they're also essential in driving and delivering equal access to essential services and opportunities. And this supports the mobiles industry's contribution to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, including SDG 3, good health, and SDG 4, quality education. Staying on social impact, the mobile industry in Europe is leading the way on climate actions. So between 2019 and 2022, operational emissions per connection in Europe fell by more than 50%, with several operators achieving reductions of more than 80%. This rate of reduction far outpaces the performance of other regions, which typically hover between 30 to 40%. One of the key drivers of Europe's rapid progress in reducing emissions has been the adoption of renewable energy sources. So today, around 3/4 of operators' energy use in Europe comes from purchased renewables, a far higher share than in other regions. And then that last point there is also really important. So the mobile industry as a whole is also enabling emissions reductions across the economy. In other sectors like energy, manufacturing, and transportation, an example would be the use of mobile IoT solutions for things like connected vehicles, smart factories, and smart meters, and that enables improved resource usage and also reduced waste. So that, in summary, provides an overview of the mobile industry's economic and social impact. One of the interesting things is that the mobile industry is delivering this increased and significant economic and social impact while navigating an increasing challenging outlook. And I'll dive into that into the next section. What we can see here is increasing market saturation, and that means that mobile internet subscriber growth is slowing. So by the end of 2024, 470 million people, that's 79% of the population in Europe, subscribe to mobile internet services. The remaining 120 million people who remain unconnected are mostly either the very young or the elderly. There are some notable differences between the 10 largest markets in Europe for mobile internet subscribers, which is what we show there on the slide. So for example, in countries like Ukraine, Poland, Romania, mobile internet adoption is below 75%, whereas in Spain, it's approaching 90%. But the bottom line is that Europe is a very mature mobile market, and we can see that when we look at our forecasts moving forward. So from now to the end of 2030, we expect European operators to add fewer than 25 million mobile internet subscribers. And by way of comparison, in the previous 6 years, operators in the region added 60 million subscribers. This slowdown in growth will inevitably add pressure to operators' top-line growth, as we'll discuss in a bit more detail. Moving on to trends in 5G. So operators are, of course, investing significant sums in 5G already in Europe. And we can see that 4G connections are in decline as 5G begins to take off. So 5G at the end of 2024 accounts for almost a third of mobile connections in Europe, and we expect this to ramp up to around 80% by the end of the decade. 2G and 3G, they already account for, they account for less than 10% of mobile connections in the region. And as a result, operators are beginning to phase out legacy networks. So by the end of 2024, there had been 44 network sunsets in Europe, and that's equivalent to around a third of the global total. Europe is expected to stay at the forefront of moving subscribers to newer network generations, with around half of planned network sunsets scheduled for 2025 taking place in this region. And this is important because it gives operators the chance to repurpose spectrum assets for more spectrally efficient 4G and 5G networks. And this is very important given the rising levels of mobile data traffic we're forecasting over the next few years. So as we all know, mobile data traffic has experienced massive growth over the last few years, driven by some of those use cases I spoke about earlier. Between 2018 and 2024, average data traffic per mobile connection grew fivefold in Europe from 3 gigabytes per month in 2019 to 15 gigabytes per month in 2024. Looking ahead, mobile data traffic will continue to grow at a significant rate in Europe, reaching almost 50 gigabytes per month per mobile connection. Key drivers of this include rising usage of video on social media platforms like TikTok, and we're also starting to see the rise of AI-generated content, which will put new demands on mobile networks, particularly when it comes to uplink traffic. The challenge, though, for mobile operators is that this significant increase in mobile data traffic isn't forecasted to translate into meaningful mobile revenue growth. So as you can see there on the slide, annual mobile revenue growth is forecasted to remain in the low single digits across Europe in the 2020s. Consequently, there'll be increased pressure on operators to diversify their service offerings and generate new revenue streams from areas adjacent to mobile and fixed connectivity. This becomes apparent when we look at other financial indicators, such as mobile capex and mobile ARPUs, and how they compare in Europe to other advanced regions. So here we can see that the mobile industry in Europe, which we know is incredibly intense competition, it's led to mobile revenues being significantly lower when compared to other advanced regions. So for example, Europe's mobile ARPUs are around 50% lower than those in South Korea, and the gap is even bigger still when we compare European ARPUs to those in Japan, the GCC states, and the US. As a result, it becomes increasingly challenging for operators to build a solid 5G business case in Europe. And the risk there is that Europe falls behind other regions when it comes to 5G deployments. I want to dig a little bit deeper now into that last point, and I want to use the GSMAi Intelligence 5G Connectivity Index as a way of benchmarking Europe's 5G performance versus other regions. So a quick bit of background on the GSMAi 5G Intelligence Connectivity Index. So the index measures the performance of leading 5G markets against key outcomes. It's constructed around two categories, 5G infrastructure and 5G services, which each consist of three pillars. So you can see there on the left-hand side that 5G infrastructure consists of spectrum, network, and experience, and 5G services consists of affordability, adoption, and market development. Each of those pillars then consists of various indicators that you can see on the screen, and overall, performance on the index is scored within a range of 0 to 100 across each indicator, with a higher score, of course, representing stronger performance in delivering 5G connectivity. On this slide, we present the results of the 5G index. The index is updated quarterly, and the slide here shows the results at the end of September 2024. So you can see that leading the way are developed economies in the Middle East, namely Kuwait, UAE, and Qatar. We then have a mix of Nordic countries, so Finland, Denmark, and Norway, as well as leading markets in Asia Pacific, such as Hong Kong and Singapore. The US and South Korea then round out the top 10. Aside from those three Nordic countries I mentioned and Switzerland, the rest of Europe scores between 40 and 50 on the index. The general trend tends to be European countries score well when it comes to metrics like affordability, but they lag behind on some of those key indicators in the network and experience pillars. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail on the next couple of slides. So on this slide, we focus on the networks pillar, and that looks at 5G base stations, 5G standalone, and 5G coverage. Starting with 5G base stations, 11 of the 15 European countries we include in the index score lower than 30 on this indicator. South Korea and China lead the way, and we can see there that on average, those countries have more than double the number of 5G base stations deployed compared to the European average. It's a similar story when we look at 5G standalone. So around 15% of operators with live 5G networks have launched 5G standalone, compared to more than 30% in Asia Pacific and North America. Europe does fare slightly better when it comes to the 5G coverage indicator, which consists of population coverage and network availability, the latter based on data from Ookla. However, even then, there's still more work for Europe to do when it comes to the deployment of 5G mid-band coverage. So right now, 5G mid-band is around 45% coverage in Europe, but more than 90% in North America and China. And we know how important that mid-band spectrum is for unlocking new 5G applications and also delivering improved network performance. This is evident when we look at this slide, which focuses on those download speeds and upload speeds, which form part of the experience pillar in the 5G connectivity index. So the overall picture is that 5G delivers a much enhanced network experience compared to 4G. And we can see that on average, 5G download speeds are 5 times faster than that of 4G for countries included in the index. However, there are of course differences between countries due to allocations of spectrum and different network deployments. And we can see that Europe lags behind some of those other markets we show there on 5G download speeds. So it currently sits behind the US, South Korea, China, and the GCC states. It is a slightly more positive picture when we look at upload speeds. So we can see there Europe performs better and is only behind the GCC states and China. However, there remains a gap in performance in Europe versus those leading markets. And that underlines the point that we need to see increased investment for 5G in order to unlock the technology's full potential. And we can see that in this slide, which looks at 5G services. And 5G services, we look at affordability, adoption, and market development. So again, the general picture tends to be Europe scores well on affordability, but it lags behind on some of those adoption and market development indicators. And as a result, what you see is when we look at Europe's performance on 5G services, it trails those leading markets in North America, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific. So if we look at adoption, for example, we know in some of the leading markets like the US, 5G adoption has already surpassed 50%. It's the same in those leading markets in the Middle East. And in comparison, only 2 markets in Europe have surpassed that 50% figure. 5G fixed wireless adoption is also a key factor in placing the US in Q8 at the top of those 5G services scores. And as a whole, we're yet to see 5G fixed wireless access take off in Europe. Market development looks at indicators like mobile revenues and mobile revenue growth and mobile data traffic growth. And again, it's a similar story there where we're seeing slower increases in mobile revenue growth and mobile data traffic growth in Europe compared to some of those other leading markets. And that is curtailing opportunities for 5G monetization. And as a result, Europe risks falling further behind. So in summary, it's clear that decisive action is needed to bolster not just Europe's performance in 5G, but the digital economy more broadly. The Mobile Economy Report goes into a lot of detail and outlines several policy recommendations. And I would highlight just a few of those on this screen. So the report highlights the need to complete the digital single market. For example, by assessing whether certain sector-specific consumer laws can either be simplified or removed to free up investment elsewhere. The report also highlights the need to ensure fairness in the internet value chain. So right now, over 2/3 of global mobile data traffic is generated by just 5 companies. It therefore should be incumbent on those large content and application providers to negotiate with ISPs on the terms and conditions for data transport services at fair and reasonable prices. That's particularly important here in Europe, where there is a need to ensure the profitability of network infrastructure deployments and also close the 5G investment gap versus other regions. The report also highlights the need to take a more long-term view on investment and innovation effects. The nature of the telecoms industry means that generating economies of scale is primarily a local challenge. Therefore, market consolidation is needed in order to generate those long-term investment and innovation opportunities for operators. And finally, spectrum. So the report highlights the need to establish a more predictable, a more pro-business approach to EU spectrum policy. And that includes things like harmonizing spectrum auctions across the region, extending license durations, and lowering licensing costs. In summary, all 4 areas, the digital single market, fairness in the internet value chain, consolidation, and spectrum, need to come together to bolster Europe's competitiveness. If these policy changes can be implemented successfully, we believe there are significant opportunities out there for European operators. And this sentiment is echoed in the final section of my presentation, which looks at some key trends and revenue opportunities for the mobile industry, with one eye on MWC Barcelona in March. So one of the key topics at MWC will be 5G Advanced. This is reflected in our annual survey of network operators, which shows that 5G Advanced has leapt to the top of operators' technology priorities. In our view, interest in 5G Advanced is driven by two factors. Firstly, the need to increase and drive new network efficiencies, and two, the need to push and develop new services. 5G Advanced helps in the former, in that it brings a number of new capabilities, such as improved massive MIMO, better beam management, and some new AI and machine learning functionalities. 5G Advanced can also help operators to develop new services. One example is 5G Reduced Capability, or RedCap for short, which has generated a lot of buzz, particularly here in Europe. Operators believe 5G Advanced, or the view is operators believe that 5G Advanced can bridge the gap between those IoT use cases best served by existing 5G networks and those served by low-power wide area networks. There's also opportunities in areas like improved integration for non-terrestrial networks, and 5G Advanced also brings some improved, enhanced positioning capabilities, which have new applications in manufacturing and other industrial industries. One of the key things I'll draw your attention to on this slide is Open RAN. So Open RAN here ranks 6th, Open Networking Technologies, ranks 6th overall in the list of operators' overall technology priorities. And the interesting thing there is, when we ran the survey in 2023, actually ranked first. So we've seen a notable drop-off in interest in Open RAN year on year. This reflects two things in our view. So one, we're seeing lower demand globally for 5G base stations. And two, we're seeing a lack of progress in allaying some of the operator concerns around Open RAN technology. Right now, the number one or the greatest concern operators have with Open RAN is security risks. And that reflects the expanded attack surface that comes with the move to open and virtualized interfaces. There are also some concerns around Open RAN's performance and how well it integrates with existing systems. Because of this, we're seeing growing interest in single-vendor Open RAN deployments. And we saw that at the end of 2023 with AT&T's deployment in the US with Ericsson, where Ericsson is responsible for the majority of the hardware and software elements. At MWC, we expect this debate around the pros and cons of a single-vendor approach to Open RAN versus one involving multiple vendors to be a key theme, particularly with several large RAN tenders due in 2025. Unsurprisingly, we also expect AI to be a key theme at MWC. However, we do expect the conversation to move on from previous years, which has focused much more on simply a discussion around use cases in areas like network operations, marketing, and customer services. This year, we think the conversation around AI will focus much more on the practicalities of deployments, with operators beginning to prioritize investments in staff training and upskilling and network capacity in order to meet the demands of AI applications. One of the interesting findings from our survey is that Edge has reduced or is now seen as only a minor AI-driven investment priority, falling from a top focus in 2023. The main reason for that is that right now there are currently a lack of AI applications that require low latency, though of course this may change in the future. The final point to note on this slide is that only a third of operators view large language model development as an AI-driven investment priority. Right now, what we're seeing is that the majority of the mobile industry, including here in Europe, who are investing in generative AI, are leveraging off-the-shelf models. They typically require less fine-tuning, and as a result, can save operators time and money versus building a model from scratch. And that's why we think operators aren't prioritizing large language model development when it comes to their AI investment priorities. Network APIs will also be a key theme at MWC. We've seen rejuvenated interest in this areas in recent years following the GSMAi Open Gateway initiative. This has garnered participation from around 3/4 of operators worldwide by mobile connections. And at MWC, we think the focus will specifically be on translating those commitments into actual commercial services and applications. So if we look at the situation in Europe, we've got 18 operator groups who have committed to the Open Gateway Initiative, but only 8 of these have actually deployed commercial Open Gateway APIs. We expect this to ramp up over the next 12 months. Most operators that have deployed Open Gateway APIs have started with those APIs related to security, so SIM swap, number verification, and one-time password validation. We know there's particular interest in these use cases in the financial services industry. Looking forward, as 5G networks start to develop, we'll expect to see more interest in network configuration APIs, such as quality on demand, which allow operators to set a given quality level for a specific mobile connection. The final trend I'd like to call out is cybersecurity. So on that previous slide, I talked about how operators are prioritizing their network API efforts around fraud prevention. Well, this reflects well because right now we're seeing a growing focus on cybersecurity among enterprises. So this chart here comes from our annual survey of enterprises. And the key takeaway here is that enhanced security and protection against cyber threats is seen as the #1 objective of digital transformation initiatives among enterprises, even higher than those related to new revenues or cutting costs. We believe there are opportunities out there for operators and the wider mobile industry in cybersecurity solutions. We've already talked about how Open Gateway can help with that. And we also see operators now deploy a number of services in areas like network security, endpoint security, and identity and access management. And we expect more operators to do that, given that there's clear demand for enhanced security and cybersecurity solutions. So that brings me to my final slide. So just to wrap up, I want to highlight 5 key takeaways from my presentation today. So the big picture is that the mobile industry is vital to the health of Europe's economy. We can see that there in the fact that mobile technologies and services generated around 5% of GDP in Europe, a contribution that amounted to almost 1.1 trillion of economic value added. We expect this to grow in the future, given the importance of the mobile industry in enabling digital transformation across other industries. However, mobile operators face a challenging financial outlook themselves. Annual mobile revenue growth is expected to remain in the low single digits in percentage terms throughout the 2020s, and that is despite the significant increase in mobile data traffic that we're forecasting. As a result, the business case becomes challenging for 5G investment, and European operators risk falling further behind when it comes to 5G deployments versus other leading markets, particularly on some of those key indicators that I highlight there around 5G mid-band coverage and 5G standalone that are particularly crucial when it comes to unlocking new applications. That's why we highlight a series of policy recommendations in the report. We believe that the mobile industry will benefit from significant reforms, prioritizing the completion of the digital single market, but also steps that enable the industry to deliver greater economies of scale through in-market consolidation. If it's able to do this, we believe there are significant opportunities out there in areas like AI, cloud, and other emerging technologies in cybersecurity. And all of these will be discussed in more detail at MWC. With that, I'll say you can download the report. We know there's physical copies here. If you can't get one of those, you can also download the report from the GSMAi Intelligence and the GSMAi Europe website. And with that, I'll hand you back to Laszlo. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, either now or later during the networking drinks. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, James. Thank you.